I'm in Bethlehem today, and it's an important city for a number of reasons. Most of all because of the birth of Jesus. This is the city where Jesus was born, and it may be partly because of the fact that David grew up and was born here, but it was prophesied that this is where the Messiah, this is where the King will be born. And if you remember the story from Christmas, Jesus' parents have to come here because everyone has to be registered in their hometown. But it was when Mary was pregnant, and there was no place for them to stay, no place with relatives, because so many people had flooded Bethlehem, because so many people had returned to the land to be registered. And so they came here, and Mary had Jesus. And so we got to go to the cave today, that's inside a church. So this is the second oldest church in the world, and it was identified by Constantine's mother, Helena. And Helena believed she had identified the spot because she'd found a cave where perhaps Mary and Joseph would have stayed, since there was no room for them. And she identified this cave and said this is most likely the place of Jesus' birth. And so we got to go to the church. Huge lines of Christians of different kinds, Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic and Protestants, waiting in line to go to this place. And you go down in the church, and it actually has Armenians represented there, and Greek Orthodox, as well as Franciscan order. And so it's crazy, all these traditions coming together on this site. So we went to the church, and we went down to this cave, and there's this silver circle with 14 points on it, and that's supposed to represent the 14 generations that Matthew talks about. 14 generations between Adam and King David, 14 generations between David and the exile, and then 14 generations since the exile happened and the promised Messiah would come. And so this is supposed to be this fulfillment. This time of fulfillment has come. 3 14s have finished. And so there's a 14-pointed star, and people go down and touch it because they believe that's the spot where Jesus himself was born. Well, whenever I think about Christmas, it raises actually a lot of theological questions. And one of the biggest ones is, why did God choose to do it like this? Like, why couldn't God just zap the world and save it? Why did God choose to send himself, to come himself and be born as a human, a fragile human being, a baby? Like, why, out of all the ways God could have chosen to fix the problem of sin in the world, why did he do it like this? And wasn't there some other way? Couldn't God just snap his fingers if he can do anything and fix this world and the messed upness and the brokenness of it? Why did Jesus have to come as a baby and live this full human life in order to fix us and heal the world? That's the question I wanted to explore. So the question we're exploring is, why did God choose to do it like this? And part of an answer, I think, can be found in Hebrews chapter 2. This is what the writer says. Since the children have flesh and blood, talking about us as humans in general, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Now, to understand the reasoning that's going on here, you have to recall the big story of the Bible. Right? God made it good, we broke it bad, he's fixing it better. And if you rewind all the way to the beginning, God made this beautiful, good world, and he made humans to be his representatives to the rest of creation. And he gave us authority over the world, and he told us to guard the garden, to guard it and to keep it safe. In other words, it's like God gave us the keys to creation. He handed them over to us. And he said, all right, this is yours now. I want you to take care of it. Do your best with it. And what did we do? When Satan tempted Adam and Eve, and they said yes to Satan and no to God, it was like they handed the keys of creation over to Satan. So here is the problem. God made a good world, and then he gave the responsibility of carrying that world over to us. And then we gave that power over to Satan. In other words, the nature of the problem of sin and the brokenness in the world It's a human problem. It's our fault. And because we're the ones ultimately responsible, a human has to be the one to fix it. An early church father, Gregory of Nazianzus, said it like this. He said, "The unassumed is the unhealed." In other words, in order to fully save us, Jesus had to fully join us. He had to fully become one of us. Let's go back to Hebrews chapter 2, and I think this will make more sense. Here's what the writer says. For this reason, again, for the reason of salvation, in order to save us, for this reason, he had to be made like them, or made like us, fully human in every way. How many ways? Every way. In order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. So now the writer of Hebrews is referencing the temple system and how that worked in connecting that to Jesus. So if you remember, the priests represented the people to God. And so the idea was, if the priest offered the right kind of worship, then the whole people would be accepted to God because the priest got it right. Now here's an important element to this, that for a priest to represent the people, they have to be one of the people. Right? I mean, just think about in our day and age and how it works with representatives, right? It would be really, really strange to elect a congressman in Colorado who never has lived in Colorado and actually lives in California and has lived there their whole life, right? That doesn't make any sense. In order to represent Colorado, they should be a Coloradan, right? It just makes sense. And in a similar way, in order for Jesus to become our priest, our representative to God, he had to be one of us. He had to be human. So again, in order to fully save us, in order to represent us to God, Jesus had to fully join us. He had to fully become one of us. Here in Bethlehem, we're at the shepherd's field where the angel appeared to the shepherds who were keeping over their flocks by night and said, "Behold, to you this day is born a Savior, the Messiah." And we just went to the caves that you can still go to today that they think the shepherds lived in. Pretty special to be here where Jesus' birth took place. We also got to see the church, which is located at the caves where they think the shepherds may have been staying, and they came and saw him. And an important part of the story because number one, shepherds were not well loved or well known for a number of reasons. They were usually poor. Often shepherds were thieves, or at least they had that reputation. And then also because as Jews, the Sabbath was such an important thing to practice, and shepherds wouldn't practice the Sabbath. So the fact that Jesus is born not in a palace, not even in a nice home, but in a stable, and the fact that the first people who greet him are not royal officials, not the priests, not the chief priests, no one like that. It's actually these lowly shepherds that were despised. I think these elements of the birth story are to help us realize not only that Jesus became human, but that he came all the way down to the lowest of the low. In other words, Jesus came not just for the best of humanity, but for the rest of humanity. For even the worst of us and the lowliest of us, Jesus came all the way down. So in order to fully save us, Jesus had to fully join us. Now the question is, what does this mean for us? How does this challenge the way we think and respond to Jesus? Now there's several things I want to encourage you in light of this to stop saying and stop thinking when it comes to Jesus. First of all, to stop saying, well, I'm only human. You know, oftentimes when people sin or make a mistake, that's kind of their fallback or excuse. Well, I'm only human. The fact is that Jesus reveals to us that being human does not have to mean being messed up and being fallen and broken. You can be human and actually be all that God intends for you to be. Or similarly, when people say, yeah, but nobody's perfect. It's a similar kind of thing where they're basically excusing sin, excusing something that's unhealthy, and saying, well, it's okay though because nobody's perfect. It's like we all want to lower the bar of expectation that God has for us. But Jesus actually raises that bar and says, no, I'm fully human and I'm perfect. So we can't go to that excuse either. Next, a lot of people, when they hear Jesus' teaching or look at the things he did, and when Christian teachers kind of hold that up as examples, their response is, yeah, but that was Jesus. Like, I'm not Jesus. He was fully God, so he kind of gets a pass. He probably kind of even cheated or something like that. No, that is a misunderstanding of theology. Jesus was fully God, but in order to save us, he also became fully human. And that means that it was just as difficult for him to follow God's way as it would be for us to try and do the same thing. And he did it. And then finally, when people say, God doesn't understand, part of the point of the incarnation is actually, yes, God does understand everything it means to be human. Jesus went through. Here's how the writer of Hebrews says it. He says, because he himself, Jesus, suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. He did suffer. He was tempted. You hear what the author's saying? And because of that, he's able to help us in a very special way. He's able to help us because he himself went through all these temptations and these sufferings, and he knows what it's like. Jesus knows what it's like. So don't say, oh, well, I'm only human. Or yeah, but nobody's perfect. Or yeah, but that was Jesus. Or God doesn't understand. Because the beauty of Christmas and the beauty of what Jesus did for us when he joined us and became one of us is that actually, no, God does understand. God really knows. The final thing that I wanted to share with you about my time in Bethlehem is how close Bethlehem is to Jerusalem. If you look on a map, they are only 6 miles apart. Now, why is that important? Because Matthew tells us in Matthew chapter 2 that there are these magi who saw this star when it arose in the east, and they came from hundreds, if not thousands of miles to come and welcome Jesus and to celebrate him as the new king. The shepherds in the fields, when the angel appeared to him and said, the Savior's been born, come and see him, what did they do? They came and saw him. Now here's the contrast. 6 miles away from where Jesus was born, there are priests and scribes and Pharisees and experts in the law. And when the Magi came to them and said, hey, here's the royal palace. Is the Messiah here? They said no. And they said, okay, well, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? And they knew the answer. They knew their Bibles that well. Right off the top of their head, they said, he's going to be born in Bethlehem. That's what the scriptures tell us. That's what the prophecies have foretold. He'll be born in Bethlehem. But then what did they do? Nothing. You guys, Bethlehem was only 6 miles away. And they didn't go and check out what had happened. It would have been so easy for them. It would have been an afternoon hike to walk over to Bethlehem and to see this Messiah, and yet they didn't. And here's the scary truth that it reveals. You can know a lot about Jesus and not to come to him. And I just want to encourage you as you consider what Christmas means and what it means that God has come near to us through Jesus. Don't mistake knowledge about him for coming to him. Do what the Magi did. Do what the shepherds did. Don't settle for nothing like the priests and the scribes and the Pharisees did. Come to Jesus.